que salga la luna, deja que se meta el sol, deja que caiga la noche, pa' que empiece nuestro amor. This is a true story. A story about love and loss and mourning, and maybe about ghosts. No, definitely about ghosts. Deja que las estrellitas me llenen de inspiración para decirte cositas muy bonitas, corazón. It was the winter, December of 2011, and I had lost my muse. She was my girl, and she dumped me. She was the one, I was sure of it. We had only been together for half a year, but I fell madly in love, what some smarter people would call infatuation. I thought it was love, though. It inspired me to write all kinds of terrible poetry and not even realize how terrible it was. You know, things like, your eyes are two dark pools of nothingness, and I am drowning in them. Yeah, it was awful. It's pretty bad. And then she dumped me, and I was heartbroken. I lost my appetite, and all of my friends who know me know what a serious sign that is when I don't want to eat and stuff my face. So my friends invited me to join them on a family road trip through northern Mexico to take my mind off of things. This is my adoptive family, my San Diego family. Everybody should get you an adoptive family, by the way, even if you still have your biological family, because it's great. It's people who love you and care about you, but you didn't grow up together, so you don't have any of the drama or bad history that you inevitably get with a biological family. Yo sé que no hay en el mundo amor como el que me das, y sé que noche con noche va creciendo más y más. So they invited me to go with them. We drove across northern Mexico. We drove through the town of Tecate. I drank too much Tecate. We drove through the states of Sonora and Sinaloa. We made our way down to the state of Jalisco. We stopped off in the town of Tequila. I drank too much tequila. By the time we got to our destination, to a little town in the state of Guanajuato in central Mexico, where we were going to a wedding, I felt raw, dried up, desiccated. I didn't have any feelings left. I was heartbroken. It was a rough time. So when they told me that I might get to spend the night in a haunted house, I jumped at the opportunity. Sé que noche con noche va creciendo más y más. We got to that little tiny town of Manuel Doblado, and we were looking for places where we would all stay. It was a big group of us, and I was the odd man out. Everyone else was staying with cousins and aunts and uncles. And they said, "Where's David going to stay?" Somebody mentioned, well, he could stay at this aunt's house, and everyone laughed. I said, "Why are you laughing?" And they said, "No, David, you don't want to stay in that house. It's haunted." And for the first time in what felt like years, my eyes lit up with a little spark of something. I said, "A haunted house? Of course I want to stay there." Anyone who knows the stories that I like and the books that I write knows how much I love haunted houses and ghost stories, and especially to get my mind off of heartbreak. Now, the young couple who owned that house, they told me, "No, David, we tried to live there. Trust me, you don't want to stay there. We tried to live there for a month. We didn't even last a month. We lived there. We would hear terrible noises. We'd hear scratching on the walls. The bedrooms adjacent to the kitchen, we would hear the kitchen furniture dragging across the floor at night. We'd go in the morning. All the furniture would be rearranged in the kitchen." You see, this whole town, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of bodies buried under this town that people don't know are there. Some houses even have buried treasure underneath it. I said, "Okay, I'll stay in the house. Really, I don't mind." They said, "Okay, if you stay there, you got to promise me, if you see the ghost, Ask him where the treasure is buried. I said, okay, I'll be happy to. Cuando estoy entre tus brazos, siempre me pregunto yo, ¿cuánto me debe el destino que contigo me pagó? So I went to the house. They brought me there late at night. It was on a solitary side road, not a lot of neighbors around there, a few dogs barking in the distance, dusty little side street. We went in and the house was surrounded by a big cement wall. So they told me, don't worry about security. This wall surrounds it. And also there are dogs who live here on the property. We come by to feed them every day and they live on the roof of the house. So the house is a cinder block building surrounded by that big cement wall. They opened up the big metal gate to let me into the property. There was a little swing hanging from a metal tin roof covering the property and the swing was swinging. I said, maybe it's the wind. That's why it's swinging. But we went in and they dropped me off. They showed me it was just a bedroom with an adjacent kitchen and a bathroom. And I could see the dogs. The dogs live on the roof of that house. And I could see the dogs up kind of back in the shadows. So they said, the dogs will bark if anything or anybody comes close. So here you are, David. And then they locked me in for the night. And I sat there. I sat with my notebook. I sat on the bed. There was a piece of furniture, sort of a bedstand with a mirror on it. And I sat there and I started to feel like I wasn't alone. I started to get a little creeped out in there. Of course, they told me the stories about what happened in there. But I looked at that mirror. I've always been afraid of sleeping in a place with a mirror. So I took my leather jacket and covered the mirror first because Bloody Mary's not going to come through that mirror and get me. I'm prepared, protected from that. And so I sat there taking notes in my notebook. Not much was happening. I started writing a little bit more of my terrible poetry about the love that I had lost, writing something about how this house was only haunted with the ghost of a love that never was. Really, I write terrible, terrible poetry. And I sat there just musing and thinking about the loss and slowly realizing that it was infatuation, that it wasn't love. It was the kind of infatuation that makes me write bad poetry. It was that kind of bad muse. And I'm sitting there mourning that loss, and then out of nowhere, the mirror that I had covered up with my leather jacket, I hear a noise from it. Bing! It was like somebody had just flicked it with their finger. So I looked at it. Nothing had moved. There wasn't a gust of wind or anything. I said, that's strange. And then I heard the dogs on the roof start going nuts. They all start barking, and I went outside. I went outside in front of them and looked up at the roof, and all three dogs are at the edge of the roof. And all three of them are staring at one spot on the ground, and they're all staring, and they're all barking together and looking at me and barking more, like, help us. And they're all staring at something that I couldn't see. Now, all three dogs were looking at the same spot, and I saw nothing there. I said, well, maybe it's time to go to bed. I went into bed. I had terrible nightmares that night, probably because of just all the emotions and because of the power of suggestion. I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining in, and it really felt like a new day. It felt like I had somehow turned a new leaf by spending the night in that haunted house. And my friends had come for me. They had opened up that metal gate door, and they came in and they knocked on the door of the house. And I came out and just stretched in the light, and they said, you ready to go? Sure. So I got in the car and they asked, did anything happen? Anything strange? And I told them, well, nah, it was fine. There's nothing to worry about, really. I told them about the mirror. The mirror made this weird ping sound at one point, and I don't know why that happened. And, a different time when the dogs started barking, and all three dogs were staring at that same spot and barking at nothing. But who knows? Dogs just bark sometimes. And then my friends, they stopped. They said, wait, say that again, David. Well, yeah, all three dogs, I could see them standing at the edge of the roof, and all three of them were barking and staring at. They said, David, you said all three dogs? There's only two dogs at that house. There used to be three. And the third dog died just 3 nights ago. We just buried that third dog. The third dog was the puppy of the other two dogs who lived there. What do the dogs look like? And I told them, I said, well, two of them were kind of back in the shadows. They were tall and lanky, but the one I saw clearly was standing at the edge. It was this white, fluffy, curly haired dog. It had a patch over, a spot over its eye. He said, David, that's the dog that just died. They took me back inside the property to show me. Sure enough, in the light of day, I looked up. There were only two dogs up there. And I know nobody came or went during the night to try to play a trick on me. So it turns out I went there looking for some kind of redemption, some kind of healing, but also looking for ghosts. And this was one of those rare times in my life that I'm convinced I actually saw one. And after that experience, my life started pulling itself back together. And I realized that life does go on. And of course, after that, I found true love sometime after that. But that's a different story for a different time. Deja que salga la luna, deja que se meta el sol, deja que caiga la noche pa' que empiece nuestro amor. Deja que las estrellitas me llenen de inspiración para decirte cositas muy bonitas, corazón. Deja que caiga la noche. The Roof Dog.